welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
Yeah.
We love to jump into some really cool stuff, and today we're looking at this daily devotional. It's called God's Provision Through Faith,
Nice.
and it's based on 2 Kings chapter 4.
Okay.
And there are these two incredible stories in there. One about a widow facing some really, really crushing debt, and another about this Shunammite woman who's longing for a child. And we're going to kind of see how even all these years later, their experiences thousands of years ago can offer us some really cool wisdom about trusting in God, even when things just feel totally impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what makes this deep dive so fascinating is that the devotional actually connects these two stories. They seem really different on the surface,
Right.
but they both show us such unique facets of faith and how God's provision can just show up in these really surprising ways.
Okay, so let's jump into that first story. We meet this widow, and things are not going well for her. Can you set the scene for us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine, you're in this widow's shoes. You're already grieving the loss of your husband, right? And you're just struggling to make ends meet. And then to make matters even worse, creditors are at your door. They're threatening to take your sons away as slaves to pay off these debts.
Oh, gosh.
It's a situation that just feels utterly hopeless.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You're already carrying so much.
Yeah.
And then to have your kids threatened, that's just a whole other level of just anguish.
Yeah.
So what does she do?
So she does what I think a lot of us would probably do. She turns to someone who she believes can help her.
Okay.
She turns to the prophet Elisha.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. Elisha doesn't just offer a comforting prayer,
Right.
He instructs her to do something really specific and kind of strange. He tells her to gather as many empty jars as she can possibly find
Okay.
and start pouring the small amount of oil that she has left into these jars.
That's so interesting because that seems like a weird instruction, you know?
I-
It's like asking her to stretch this tiny bit of oil way beyond any reasonable expectation.
Right. It seems counterintuitive for sure.
Yeah.
But, that's where I think the deeper meaning lies. Because, you see, the widow's story isn't just about this, miraculous event. It's about the nature of faith itself and her obedience to Elisha's instructions, even when they didn't really make sense. Logically, it's how is this going to help?
Right.
That demonstrates that faith often requires us to act even when we don't fully grasp, what the outcome is going to be.
So it's not just about hoping for a miracle.
Right.
It's about actually participating and making it happen.
Exactly. And what happens is incredible. The oil miraculously multiplies it, fills every single jar, and she's then able to sell the oil, pay off her debts, and secure this future for herself and for her sons.
Boy.
And I think this incredible turn of events highlights a really crucial lesson for us today. It shows that even when we're in the midst of what feels like complete despair, there's always room for faith to take root and to grow.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in those feelings of, why me?
Yeah.
Or how is this even possible?
Yeah.
When we're facing challenges. But this story encourages us to shift our focus. Instead of getting stuck in the problem itself, it's more about taking that first step,
Yes.
that act of faith, and seeing what unfolds.
Yeah, just start pouring.
Just start pouring, right?
And what's fascinating here is that this seemingly simple act of pouring the oil actually holds a deeper theological significance as well.
Okay.
It connects to this concept of God's grace.
Wow.
So the widow's obedience coupled with God's favor brings about this miracle. So her actions, though they might seem insignificant on their own, actually become this conduit for God's power to work in her life.
I like that. And it actually reminds me of the verse in the passage. It says, "Then go inside and shut the door behind you, and your sons pour oil into all the jars. And as each is filled, put it to one side." The emphasis there is really on action, on doing something even before the miracle becomes apparent. It's like the devotional is saying, hey, faith isn't passive. It's this active partnership with God.
You've hit the nail on the head. And this idea of active faith actually leads us beautifully into the second story, the story of the Shunammite woman.
Okay.
Her experience kind of provides this contrasting yet equally profound perspective on God's provision.
Interesting.
And I think it might resonate with those of you listening who find yourselves in a different kind of struggle, a struggle maybe of longing and unanswered prayers.
Right.
So the Shunammite woman, she is described as this wealthy and incredibly generous person,
Okay.
especially towards Elisha.
Right.
She just recognizes him as this man of God and goes above and beyond to make sure that he's comfortable.
She even builds him a whole guest room, right?
Exactly.
She's like, hey, prophet, if you're ever in town, you've got a place to stay.
She's like, this is your home away from home. So
Yeah.
you can imagine Elisha's like, wow, this woman is amazing.
Right.
And he wants to kind of repay her kindness. So he's like, Is there anything I can do for you? Maybe put in a good word with the king or something like that.
Interesting. So his first thought is to offer, like, material solutions.
Exactly. He's
Yeah.
thinking earthly favors, uses influence to kind of benefit her in a tangible way.
But what's so interesting is that the Shunammite woman, she seems content, right?
She
She's not lacking anything materially, at least.
Yeah, she doesn't ask for anything for herself,
Right.
but Elisha's servant Gehazi, he notices something.
Okay.
He observed that, despite all of her outward blessings, she has this longing for a child.
Oh, wow.
Her husband is old, they don't have any heirs,
Mm.
and it's this like silent pain that she's been carrying.
That adds a whole other layer to the story, right? Because it reminds us that even those who seem to have it all can still be struggling with really deep personal stuff.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's like the things we want most are totally out of our control,
Right.
beyond what money or social status can give us.
Exactly. And this is where the story takes this like really remarkable turn.
Okay.
Elisha, moved by her unspoken need, he prophesies that she will have a son.
Hold on. He's telling a woman who's past childbearing age that she's going to have a baby.
I know.
It's a huge statement to make, especially back then, in ancient Israel. Having sons was super important for carrying on the family name, all of that.
Yeah, it carries a lot of weight, for sure.
So what happens?
So get this, a year later, she gives birth to this healthy baby boy.
Wow.
It's like this crazy testament to God's power to just completely defy human limitations and bless us beyond what we could ever imagine.
You know what really strikes me here is the surprise factor.
Yeah,
Unlike the widow who actively sought out Elisha for help,
right,
the Shunammite woman, she wasn't even asking for this miracle.
right.
It was a blessing that she had probably given up on.
It really underscores a crucial aspect of faith, just being open to God's unexpected blessings,
Yeah.
even when they show up in ways we could never have planned for.
And it makes me think about God's timing, too.
Yes. We might have our own timelines and expectations, but God's timing is often so different from our own.
It is.
The Shunammite woman had probably come to terms with the fact that she wasn't going to have kids.
Yeah.
And then God, in his perfect timing, decides to bless her in this way that defies all human logic and expectation.
And the devotional actually challenges us to think about this in our own lives. Think about those times when things didn't go according to your plan. But looking back, you can see God's hand at work. Maybe a closed door led to an even better opportunity, or a seemingly impossible situation unfolded in this more beautiful way than you could have ever orchestrated.
Oh, I've totally been there. I remember this one time I was like so set on getting this specific job,
Uh-huh.
and I just thought it was the perfect fit,
Right.
and it just didn't happen. I was crushed.
Yeah.
But that closed door led me to this totally different path, one that brought me so much more fulfillment and actually aligned better with like my purpose.
And looking back, I can see how God's timing was at play, even though I couldn't see it then.
It's about recognizing that he has a plan for us even when we can't see the full picture.
Right. And trusting in God's timing isn't about like sitting around and waiting.
Yeah.
It's about actively seeking his guidance and being open to his redirection.
Yeah, exactly.
And that brings us to the heart of this whole deep dive, learning to trust in God's provision even when things are hard and uncertain. It's so easy to just get like super caught up in our own anxieties and worries.
Right.
But these stories from the devotional really remind us that God is always working, even when we don't have the full picture.
Yeah.
The widow's experience, it shows us the power of taking that first step of faith, even when things seem impossible.
Right.
And the Shunammite woman's story, it teaches us to embrace God's unexpected blessings and really just trust in his perfect timing.
Absolutely. You've beautifully summarized, I think, the key takeaways here. And what's so powerful is that it doesn't just leave us with these inspiring stories. It actually challenges us to apply these lessons to our own lives.
Right. So it's not enough to just kind of like listen and nod our head. So what are some of the questions that the devotional poses for us?
Well, it asks some really thought-provoking questions, like how might these stories encourage you to approach your own situations, Could there be areas where you're holding back, waiting for that perfect moment?
Right.
And what would it look like to take a step of faith, trusting that even with just a little bit, God can do amazing things?
I love that those are such good questions.
Yeah.
They really get to the heart of what it means to actually live out our faith in real ways.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that faith isn't passive.
No.
It's about actively engaging with God, trusting his promises and moving forward even when we don't have all the answers.
And it's about recognizing that he's already given us everything we need to step into that fullness of his plan for our lives.
Mm.
Sometimes that might look like gathering our empty jars and just starting to pour,
Right.
even when we can't see how it's all going to work out.
Yeah.
Other times it might look like surrendering our timelines and expectations.
Right.
Just remaining open to the unexpected ways God chooses to bless us.
Man, these stories from God's provision through faith offer just this, like, so much wisdom.
They do.
The widow and the Shunammite woman, they lived such different lives.
Yeah.
But they both teach us these really profound lessons about trusting in God's faithfulness and provision.
Their experiences, they really remind us that God sees our needs, even the ones that we keep hidden in our hearts.
Right.
He cares about our struggles, our longings, and our hopes.
Yeah.
And he desires to work in our lives in ways that are so much bigger than what we can even grasp.
It's been so great exploring these stories with you. What a great reminder that no matter what we're facing, God is faithful, he provides, and his timing is always perfect.
It is.
To our listeners out there, we encourage you to really think about these questions.
Yeah,
And see how these timeless truths might speak into your own life.
that's right.
Remember, even just a tiny step of faith can lead to incredible blessings.
Amen to that.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.